You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam. Streaming on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Welcome, everybody, to bonus episode number 6 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me is my co-host and good brother, Liam. Liam, welcome back. Bonus episode number 6. Another episode here discussing Batman. The adventures continue as we continue discussing the latest introduction to the DCAU, and we are continuing just kind of giving a basic review and our thoughts on the latest issues from this series, based on this series of comic books based on the DC Direct figures, which are based on designs based on Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, so it's a mouthful. Easy for you to say, but yeah, it's an exciting thing, and unlike with the first 2 issues, which you can go back and hear our thoughts on them in bonus episode number 5. But I think this weekend we'll get into kind of what we liked and didn't like, and our kind of big picture thoughts in a moment. But I think these next 2 chapters were an improvement, at least from a narrative perspective, over the first couple.
I agree. I feel like they're settling in at least a little bit here to a tone that sort of matches up. I don't know what it is, but every time that Batman speaks in the episode or in the comic, I just can't. It's almost like the dialogue doesn't belong to him, like it belongs to somebody else. I'm having a hard time marrying the dialogue written for Batman to the Batman character. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, maybe part of that, I was thinking about this, is due to that we're not used to having like Batman have an inner monologue in the show.
Sure.
I think that could maybe be part of it. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from with that, because there is definitely a certain unique. It just doesn't feel it's not quite as easy to imagine Kevin Conroy's Batman speaking the way that Batman appears to be speaking in this book so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's not saying that it's bad or that it wouldn't marry to another Batman interpretation. I think you're right. I think it's just what we know about Batman. He's very, I don't know. He just doesn't talk like that from my recollection. And like you said, we don't have a lot of episodes where Batman does narration. So maybe that's where it differs. And obviously this is a comic book, so Batman, blank panels of Batman just swinging from building to building with the occasional comment to a villain or somebody that he's fighting with would be one thing. But I don't know, even in the way that he interacts with the Mad Hatters, we'll get into it later on as we discuss the full issue here. I think it's just something I can't marry. But anyway, all right, let's go back before we get too far ahead here. So there have been 2 chapters. So chapter 3 and 4 have been released. So this is part 1 and part 2 of what they call Mentors. So this episode, if it were to be an episode, Mentors, which introduces Deathstroke, who aka Slade Wilson, who we've seen obviously in one of your favorite animated shows of all time, Teen Titans. He plays a huge role in that. He certainly plays a role in the live action Titans. He plays a role in the Arrowverse, in CW's Arrow. But this is the first time we've been introduced to this character officially within the DCAU.
Yeah, and I think we can kind of get into the design. Obviously, as you mentioned, this is based on the DC Direct toy line, which we kind of talked about in broad strokes in our last episode. But Deathstroke is one of those characters, especially the version they've gone with, which is very much the sort of a DCAU version of sort of the classic, George Perez New Teen Titans look for him, with the very bright blue and orange color palette and a very striking look to him. You kind of just interpreted that very classic Deathstroke look into the new Batman adventure style. And I think from a visual standpoint, and obviously we have the advantage of Ty Templeton, the artist on this book, also happened to be the guy who helped design the figures. So it's a pretty easy transition from that figure to the page of these comics. And I think Deathstroke, especially from a visual standpoint, really just fits right in with any sort of classic DC Comics rogue who's appeared in this DCAU.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really a crime that this character was never used before, because it's such an interesting. Like, you could definitely see this character, for me at least, being introduced in either the original Batman the Animated Series, or the new Batman Adventures, just because of his ability, his training, and what this character, this assassin-like nature of this character that would match up so well in hand-to-hand combat against Batman. We saw some of that in some of the Batman Arkham games, and what a formidable foe he is because he's trained to be this assassin. Like, he's toe to toe with Batman in a lot of things. So being able to see, now we have not yet seen, of course, them do any sort of battle, because he's been introduced as this sort of mysterious vigilante that may or may not be on the side of good. We know that he's not completely on the up and up, based on some of the motives he seems to be discussing and trying to pry Batgirl away from Batman's stable, as we saw in the first issue. And then in the second issue, he's working close with Tim, sort of building this camaraderie with Tim. So we know that his motives are not pure, but we haven't seen a Batman versus Deathstroke introduction just yet.
Yeah, we sort of have mentions that Batman's aware of a mercenary that matches Deathstroke's description. So I guess he's been out in the world having these adventures, but obviously we haven't seen any of those. So it's interesting having that introduction, because obviously we as readers, as DC Comics fans of all these different properties that he's appeared in, know we kind of all know the deal. So it's always interesting, I think, when you introduce a character where everybody knows they're the bad guy, and yet you're kind of introducing it to where the heroes are not yet aware of it. And it's interesting, because I think sometimes that can come off as like a little bit like introducing Mysterio in the latest live action Spider-Man film as a good guy. And you're like, well, first of all, his name's Mysterio. Second of all, like anyone that's ever read a Spider-Man comic or can do a cursory Google search of the name Mysterio, once they get past the wrestler, I imagine, will find
crossover.
Will find that this guy's clearly a villain, and he uses manipulation and special effects to fool Spider-Man. So there's a little bit of that. I think there's a little bit of danger with introducing Deathstroke that way, but I think so far it's been handled pretty well. We have Batman kind of immediately knows who he is. Robin's kind of wowed by his tactics and how cool he is, and we kind of, as you mentioned, he also has this sort of brief interaction with Batgirl, and she's very much not impressed by him. But yeah, we sort of find out near the end of chapter 3 that he is, in fact, he's plotting something. Something's a bit amiss with him, and he sort of has this plot maybe to try to steal Batgirl and Robin away from Batman. We don't quite know the why or the how he plans to do that just yet, but there's clearly a little more to this than him just kind of being, in town to lend a hand to the other heroes.
That's right. Yeah, it's to be continued, as the end of the episode would probably say, if this were this would be an episode. Let's talk a little bit about the villains that have been showcased in these two issues, Liam. So Clayface pops up, and that was a sort of a surprise. We got the reveal of the cover of chapter 3. I believe it was chapter 3, and of course it has Deathstroke on the front of it, but it also has Robin and an appearance of Annie, who we talk about a lot despite not having reviewed the episode yet, but is of course from the episode Growing Pains. She was a significant part of that episode, and certainly a significant part of the relationship between Tim and Bruce, as we learn later on. But she makes a cameo appearance that sort of left me asking why.
Yeah, other than kind of giving Robin a reason to hate Clayface a little more, I didn't quite see her. So we sort of find out throughout the episode that, episodes I say, but the issues that Clayface was sort of on the hunt for a cure, and Deathstroke and his assistant Sonny sort of arranged to give him what he thought was a cure, but what would actually make him more powerful and also sort of drive him insane. And we see him being able to split himself off and sort of run off in different directions as he's fighting Batman on one half while he's trying to escape down an alley at the same time. And as Robin and Batgirl kind of go to confront him, he just kind of very randomly turns into Annie, which kind of angers Robin, and then we immediately get sort of the debut of Deathstroke, who helps them take Clayface down. So I didn't quite see the point in that, other than to go, hey, remember this? Like, and that's all right. Like, I appreciate a good reference as much as the next guy, especially to an episode that I personally love so much. But it is for the fact that she's on the cover and all that. I think that's a little bit. You would expect maybe a bit more than what we got with her being so prominently featured on the cover, and her being such a memorable part of that Tim Drake Robin character in that new Batman Adventures run.
And granted, obviously they have stretched this man, it's so confusing. This issue, which is split into parts and chapters. So they've stretched this into a third part, which has yet to debut. So we don't know whether or not that eventually plays into. It could play into something later on. We don't know, but It did not play any significance into chapter 4, which was part 2 of this mentors issue. So other than, I think you speculated, we were talking, just after the first issue came out, as to whether or not they may end up, they may be putting feelers out as to what they could eventually do if they are going to release more action figures, because we talked about, obviously, the purpose of this whole thing is to sell toys, or it was inspired by the ability to sell more toys. Right. So there are certain toys that they have not released yet. They have not done a new Batman Adventures version of Clayface. They did a Batman the Animated Series version of Clayface. So if they were in fact going to do a new Batman Adventures Clayface, you could see them packing in an Annie figure and selling it as a 2-pack for a huge markup and getting people interested in that way. That would also, we talked about that as things that they are using in these issues as a way to sort of market the toy line. We saw Roxy Rocket appear. Of course, there's Roxy Rocket figure. We see in Chapter 4, Part 2 of Mentors, we see Firefly appear, of course, and the anti-Firefly Batsuit appear. Both have been made in this series in action figure form. So they're very intentional, at least, about what they seem to highlight and include in these issues in that way, almost as if there is a DC directive.
Yes.
DC directive to put some of these things in the comics and to include them, or just that the writers and certainly Ty Templeton have the ability to look at the toys that have been released already and say, we'll use this one, we'll pick somebody from this one, okay, they've made a figure of this one, let's reuse this one.
Yeah, I definitely think that could be part of it. And we actually talked about, one of the sort of the layouts, which is the comic page before the dialogue and color and everything is put out for Chapter 4, Part 2 of this story, has been kind of floating out there for a while. It was, I think, one of the first images that was released kind of when the book was announced. It's this kind of like it's one page, but it's kind of 2 half spreads where up top it's Deathstroke and Robin being accosted by these Could we call them murder hornets, Cal?
They are definite. They are referred to as giant Asian bees, I think is what they're referred to, but they're
Bees.
definitely murder hornets, Liam.
Okay.
Bees?
Well, Job's not on board. But yeah, so and on the bottom half we see, and again in this original layout, we see Batman fighting this Wonderland gang, and we see the Mad Hatter. And of course, in the original layout, it was the Batman the Animated Series design for him, which at the time we talked about it sort of off the air that perhaps maybe because they didn't make a new Batman Adventures Mad Hatter, they're going to use the BTAS design to, again, just kind of point everyone back towards the toy line as much as they can. But in fact, in this final version that came out, months after that image first popped up on the internet, we get to see actually they did make a correction or change their minds or whatever. And in fact, we do get the new Batman Adventures version of the Mad Hatter appearing as well.
Yeah, and this isn't the first correction that's sort of been made midstream. I mean, the benefit to this being a digital first comic is that they've been able to sort of go back and make corrections to sort of line up with things. This one obviously going in the other direction. We haven't had another one of those figures that they have not released yet. They've not done a new Batman Adventures Mad Hatter, so maybe we'll see one in the near future. That would be great. But one of the things that the corrections and the ability to change things up in this digital these digital drawings, since they're not physical copies released yet, some of the corrections, they've actually gone back and changed some of the things to match them up with the action figures post original release.
Yeah, things like in the earlier chapters, which again we reviewed in our previous bonus episode, Jason Todd had red hair and sort of a grayish jacket, and then maybe a week or two after the release, that was sort of updated, and now he directly resembles his action figure with the white streak in his hair and the brown jacket. So I'll be interested to see if other things like that happen going forward, or if that was just one that they felt like they had to fix because he was, they wanted it to be a spot on representation of his look on that figure. Although for my money, I thought introducing him with the gray jacket and the red hair was like, well, that's the easiest repaint in the world to do, to re-release. You release the first Red Hood figure in Series 1, then Series 4 or 5, you released the first DCAU appearance, Jason Todd, with his gray jacket and his red hair. But no, apparently that was just something they decided to change kind of at the last minute.
Now you're thinking like a executive from a toy company, Liam. I guess that will be a great segue before we get into sort of our final review for these latest two chapters. The visuals of this continue to, for me at least, to be the best part of these comics.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think there's really, really strong visuals, like we've already kind of mentioned. I love how well Deathstroke fits into this world. I love that they went with that color scheme. Again, we have artist Ty Templeton and colorist Monica Kubina working on this issue, and they do a great job of integrating new characters into this world. I think Deathstroke's assistant Sonny, who I think I mentioned earlier, has a very striking design, and as far as we know, this is just kind of a throwaway character. We don't, at least as of yet, we don't know if she's meant to be kind of a version of Slade's daughter, the Ravager in the comics, or if she could be sort of a female version of one of his other associates that were from the books, or if this is just kind of a completely original character. But some really striking designs. We get to see the Wonderland gang that works with Mad Hatter, who I think Paul Dini has used in a few other of his books. I think including the Harley Loves Joker miniseries that came out a couple of years ago. So fun to see him be able to reuse those characters, and then to see them sort of properly and officially adapted into that DCAU style as well.
Yeah, there's also some nods in at least in chapter 3. We get a nod to one of your favorite Batman episodes, the new Batman Adventures. Very controversial episode being Critters, as Deathstroke and Sonny drive away in a Farmer Brown produce truck.
Yes, and I'm excited at what this could mean. I remember listening to the creators talk during one of the commentaries on Justice League, or how Farmer Brown should have shown up in Cadmus in Justice League Unlimited, and I do think that was I really think he could have been involved in splicing and stuff like that later on down the line, heading towards Batman Beyond. So any nod to Farmer Brown. And of course, later in Chapter 4, we see when Robin and Deathstroke meet up to fight Firefly. They're in an insect museum, and we happen to see a giant praying mantis display, very reminiscent of, in fact, the giant praying mantises that Batman and Robin and Batgirl had to fight in the Farmer Brown episode. So, yeah.
Yes, how could we forget?
So some great little nods to that stuff as well, and we get like a slightly tweaked Firefly design as well, a little more armored, and there's sort of an offhanded mention that his face has been burned since we saw him in that new Batman Adventures episodes, and that he's kind of gone under a little bit of a personality transplant.
Yeah, we find out now that he's a bug collector, which is a new twist on the character. But he does have this very interesting new addition that is sort of revealed in the final panel, where not only does he have his flamethrower, his attachment gun that comes with him, but he can also shoot flames from the mouth of his suit. So and the new design, I really like it. It has a little bit of that classic Firefly feel, but also with a new twist on it. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, when the mouth opens up, it kind of, speaking of Marvel Comics homages, a little bit of an Ultron look to him when he opens the mouth. The kind of the silver ears or antenna and the big red eyes, and then the mouth opening kind of reminded me a little bit of that Ultron character as well. But yeah, I like that sort of update to him, and to kind of put a little more color on him, because as it's mentioned, he had this very deeply personal reason for becoming Firefly original when he's stalking his ex-girlfriend. And then we see him a few more times, in other Batman episodes, and I think he pops up in Justice League as well. Yep. But we don't really get much color thrown on to him as a character, and his design kind of stays the same. So it's interesting here to see them kind of add a few little extra flourishes to that character as well. I think that's pretty cool.
So based on his appearance in Justice League, this is going to be one heck of a try and finagle this into the timeline for the guys over at Watchtower Database, because he looks exactly the same as he does in new Batman Adventures in Justice League Unlimited when he shows up. But in the meantime, this is supposed to take place, I believe, before that. So now he has this updated suit. So now he goes back to his original suit at some point. Very
right.
Good luck,
guys. At the
very
least, I don't think they showed his unmasked face in Justice League. Yes. So at least we don't have to try to understand why he went from burned horribly to back to regular face. At least he kept the helmet on in Justice League.
There you go.
You can theorize that he only had access to his older gear for some reason. But yes,
maybe the suit will get destroyed in chapter 5 part 3 of issue 2. Who knows?
This will be addressed in a future Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover or something like Scarecrow's redesign was.
Yeah, who knows? That was a good way for them to retcon that. I like that. All right, the last thing I'll say about visuals here in this is they have heavily relied upon the Bat Cycle in the last 2 issues also, which we had commented on. It was funny. The Bat Cycle appears in the first issue. Batgirl is using it, and that's where Deathstroke / Slade appears for the first time. He's sort of sitting on the Bat Cycle as Batgirl walks up, and it is the Batman, the animated series design, which,
Yes.
as we talked about off air, that is the only available Bat Cycle in the toy line, the DC Direct toy line. They actually just released that within the last 6 months. It again pops up in a beautiful panel in Chapter 4 with Tim riding it. But we discussed that the Bat Cycle, I don't think, other than Nightwing's cycle and maybe a one-time Barbara use, I don't remember the Bat Cycle making many appearances in the new Batman Adventures.
No, I'm pretty confident because even when Batman's not around, I think we see in episodes like Girls' Night Out. I think Barbara's driving the regular Batmobile, so I don't really think they show Batgirl, and I definitely know we don't ever see Robin on a motorcycle in that series. So yeah, it could just be that design is just Nightwing's bike, and Batman's still using, the original BTAS motorcycles that he and Robin, Dick Grayson Robin, both rode in the original series. So I mean that one's not as much of a continuity alarm as
Sure.
Things like Firefly's design or Lex being in his robot suit while still being a businessman. Not quite as hard to fit in as that, but yeah, it definitely was an interesting design.
All right, so I think we can both agree the visuals continue to be the standout for these. Now the plot for this, I enjoyed the plot, at least for chapters 3 and 4, better than I did for chapters 1 and 2. I think it feels a little bit more like it feels closer to a Batman Gotham Adventures, which was, of course, the new Batman Adventures comic book spin-off.
Yes.
That happened at the time of the new Batman Adventures. It feels to me much more like that, fitting in that world, than the previous issue did.
Yeah, and I think there's little homages. Obviously, we have this outline, as we mentioned, this Jason Todd subplot that's sort of slowly building. In this issue, as we mentioned, in chapter 4 we get very little Batman. It's mostly focused on Robin and Deathstroke. But we do get the scene, as we mentioned, of him fighting Mad Hatter, and then he kind of notices he's being watched. And that, to me, felt very reminiscent of the first couple issues of the Hush storyline, where Batman's kind of aware something's going on, or perhaps the beginnings of the Under the Red Hood, maybe might be more apt as well. But he's sort of aware that there's a new player in town, but he has no idea who it is, or why this person is watching them, or how he even knew that Batman was going to be at this warehouse, because Batman notes that this particular crime wasn't coming across any police scanners, or and there's no media there. So it's, how does this guy even know that Batman's here? So I like that they're still very slowly building that intrigue with this Jason Todd character. So far, we don't quite know what his origins are, how he fits into all of this yet. And yeah, I would agree that as far as tonally, I think these two issues, and certainly this interesting idea of Deathstroke kind of wanting to steal the Bat family away from Batman is kind of an interesting wrinkle. And I look forward to the follow up on this in part 3, chapter 5
of issue 2.
Yes.
I would say for me, I think the standout sequences for these two issues, since I don't want to just break down everything panel by panel, but I think the standout for both of these issues were the battle sequences. Even though the Clayface scene is sort of cut short, and we already talked about the sort of quizzical at best inclusion of the Annie character, I think that it was good to see a fight sequence involving a classic Batman rogue, and then of course Batman, Batgirl, and Robin. And then for me, I think part two issue 4 or issue 2 to in the Bug Museum versus the Murder Hornets with Robin, and then the introduction of the Firefly character again, or reintroduction of the Firefly character. I think that those panels combined with the action in it, I think were the standout for me for these 2 parts at least, as far as things go. So as far as like just giving this a standard blank out of 10 as far as enjoyment for these 2 parts, I guess I would give it about a 7 out of 10. I think the art continues to carry everything. I think the story was certainly better than the first 2, and I enjoyed it. I think there's certainly things, like I said, the tone of Batman is still just kind of hard to marry to that character. I think continuing to build the intrigue with a Jason Todd, it's a very, very slow burn. You know, he didn't even make an appearance in this chapter at all, or in this part at all. So it's a very slow burn that I hope isn't rushed, that there isn't a rush payoff, but as long as that's paid off, then this will totally be worth it. So I'll give it a 7 out of 10 as far as enjoyability.
Yeah, I'd go maybe a little bit higher. I'm going to give it an 8. A lot of it, and again, a lot of this is a credit to Ty Templeton and Monica Kubina, but we talked about this, I think, back in our previous bonus episode, but how kind of rare it was to see, the Bat family all fighting together. There are a few episodes here and there, but most episodes of the New Batman Adventures, it's either, just Batman and Robin or just Batman and Batgirl. So getting to see them all kind of be in action together and getting a little more characterization on Tim Drake, and sort of, as we know, Batman's not the best or the most complimentary guy. So, it's kind of easily understandable why Robin would be interested or sort of wowed by this guy who's maybe just as talented of a fighter as Batman, but who's also not afraid to dish out a compliment to his young friend there either. I think they're building something. So I'm definitely interested in seeing how this Robin and Deathstroke relationship plays out, and kind of where Deathstroke and of course, as you mentioned, the very slow burning Jason Todd story as well. So yeah, it's always fun. We mention this every time, and we will continue to mention it. It's always going to be fun to just go back and live in this world for a little bit, even if we do have some issues or some tweaks that we personally would like to see. So always great to spend time and get new adventures in this DC animated universe. So yeah, definitely a thumbs up, and I'm very much looking forward to the next couple chapters.
Absolutely. So from what we've heard, these are going to be out on Thursdays every other week, it sounds like. At least that's what the schedule. And of course, exciting news that, with things starting to reopen in a lot of areas, physical comic book stores, comics shipped for the first time this week to physical comic book stores for the first time in a very long time. So that means that I believe there are some release dates for physical copies out in June, at least for the first issue. There have been some variant covers that have been released and kind of uncovered that DC really has not been doing a great job of announcing, unfortunately.
Yeah, but a lot of them are those kind of store exclusives where, an artist will make a deal with a certain comic shop and just sell an exclusive cover. But yeah, you would think they would, it's still eventually some of that money's definitely still going to DC. So you would think they would want to do a better job of, throwing out, hey, this is when the issue's coming out. This is where you can buy these alternate covers and all of that. But yeah, you have to kind of do a little hunting for yourself. But yeah, especially for the first physical issue, there's quite a few pretty rad variants that are worth going out of your way to look at if you're a big giant nerd like we are, and are so excited about this. And yeah, definitely if you can, I obviously we're reading these digitally as they come out, because we're like the kid on Christmas Eve, we didn't want to wait to unwrap the present. But definitely, yeah, if you can, be sure to support your local comic book store and pick up these books physically as well. And I know as much as the convenience of digital comics is, I'm always going to be a guy who likes to have the physical thing in my hand. So I'm looking forward to picking up the physical versions of these issues as well.
Absolutely. Like you said, especially with everything that's happened, comic book stores have been hit so hard in the economy. And if you're able to, even buying a single issue or a couple issues here or there are going to help support these people that really, it's a tough business to be in these days anyway, as everything moves towards digital. But the world will look a lot different, and to me would be a lot darker if you didn't have the option to go to a physical comic store. So yeah, if you're able to, obviously comic book stores are not the only people that were hurt in this situation. So totally understand it, but if you're able to, do what you can to support those local comic book stores, and buying a physical copy of Batman The Adventures Continue is probably one way to do that. So definitely looking forward to that. Liam, we will have another bonus episode in the next couple weeks talking about, hopefully, when we get the next 2 chapters released. I look forward to doing that. Anything else for you today?
No, I think that'll wrap us up. Hope everyone enjoyed their holiday weekend, and come back for our regular episode this coming Saturday.
That's right. Don't forget to follow us on social media at DCAU Review, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.